The first snowflake landed on her eyelash, and Elara knew she was already dead. It wasn't the cold, though it bit through her threadbare sweater like teeth, or the exhaustion that turned her legs to lead. It was the silence. The deep, watchful silence of the Blackwood that had swallowed all sound an hour ago. No wind sighed through the towering pines. No creature scurried in the underbrush. The world had been muffled under a blanket of impending snow and something else's a presence. A predator's patience. They found the trail. Her breath hitched, a sharp, painful gasp in the frozen air. Don't run. Running is prey. The lesson from her old life from the Silverfang Pack was etched into her marrow. But her human heart, the part that still remembered warmth and safety, hammered against her ribs like a frantic bird. Thump, 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 thump. The sound was deafening in the quiet. She forced her feet forward, each step a deliberate, agonizing act of will. The forgotten cabin was close. The map, stolen and memorized and then burned, was seared behind her eyes. One more ridge, just one more. The trees began to thin, their skeletal branches clawing at the bruised twilight sky. A twig snapped, not under her boot, to her left, 50 yards back, deliberate. Elara froze, her blood turning to ice slurry in her veins. Little did I know, leaving the pack would be the easy part. Staying gone, that was the impossible task. She didn't turn. Turning acknowledged the hunter. Instead, she tilted her head, listening with every fiber of her being, the way her wolf half, suppressed, caged, starving, wanted to. The scent hit her a second later, carried on a sudden, bitter gust. Pine, frost, and the sharp, coppery tang of dominant male. Alpha, not just any alpha. His signature was woven through it, a dark thread of power and fury that made her knees buckle. Kaelen, the alpha king of the Silverfang Pack. He hadn't sent his betas. He'd come himself. A low, visceral growl rippled through the gathering dark. It wasn't loud. It was a vibration in the earth, in the air, a promise of violence that tightened around her throat like a collar. The sound traveled up through the soles of her worn boots and settled in the hollow of her stomach. Run. The human one. Elara broke into a sprint, terror lending her speed. The trees blurred. Thorns ripped at her clothes and skin. She could hear him now, the soft, relentless thud-thud-thud of pursuit. Not running, loping. He was playing with her. The cabin materialized through the trees, a hulking shadow of slumped logs and a sagging roof. A place forgotten by maps and men. Her sanctuary. It looked like a grave. She hit the door shoulder first, the rotten wood splintering but holding. Locked. Frantic, her fingers numb, she clawed at the rusted keyhole, then gave up and slammed her palm against the warped frame. A crack. Another heave. The door gave with a shriek of protesting hinges, and she fell inside, into darkness and the smell of dust, mildew, and old, cold ashes. Scrambling up, she slammed the broken door shut, braced a heavy, worm-eaten table against it, and backed into the center of the single room. Her chest burned. The only light filtered through grimy windows, painting the room in shades of gray and deep blue. The silence outside was gone, replaced by the whisper of falling snow. And footsteps. Slow, measured, circling. Crunch, 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 he was taking his time, drawing it out. Her punishment for running was to marinate in her own fear. "Elara!" His voice. Oh, goddess, his voice. It wasn't shouted. It was a low, resonant baritone that cut through the wooden walls as if they were paper. It was the voice that had once commanded armies of wolves, that had settled disputes with a word, that had whispered promises in the dark, promises that had turned to ash. It held no anger. That was the worst part. It was calm, absolute, the calm of a judge who has already passed sentence. She pressed a fist to her mouth to stop the whimper. "You've led me on a rather pretty chase, little wolf," Kaelen said. His tone was almost conversational, but each word was a nail in her coffin. 3 months, through human cities that stink of iron and waste, across territories that would have torn a lesser wolf apart. A pause. The footsteps stopped right outside the door. "Did you think I wouldn't come? Did you think you could just disappear?" She found her voice, a ragged, broken thing. "I am not your prisoner, Kaelen. I renounced the pack." A soft, humorless chuckle. "The pack does not renounce its alpha, and an omega does not renounce her destiny. You know the laws, written in blood and bone, not ink. Omega, the word was a brand, the lowest rank. The peacekeeper, the healer, the vulnerable heart of the pack. And his, chosen by him, claimed under the full moon, until she saw what that claiming truly meant. The brutality veiled as strength. The coldness in his eyes when he condemned a rival pack to slaughter. The way he looked at her not as a mate, but as a possession. A pretty, fragile thing to be kept on a shelf. The table against the door began to tremble. "You're tired, Elara," he said, his voice softening into a terrible mockery of concern. "I can smell your exhaustion, your fear. It's a sour, pathetic scent. Come out, accept your correction, and we can go home." Correction. The euphemism made her stomach heave. She remembered the last correction. A night in the silver-lined cells beneath the Alpha Mansion, her wolf silenced, her human spirit broken into splinters, for the crime of pleading for mercy. "This is my home now," she spat, the defiance surprising her. "Go back to your throne of fangs and lies, Kaelen. I'd rather freeze to death as a human than live another day as your pet." The silence that followed was thicker than the cabin walls, colder than the snow. Then the door exploded inward, not opened, exploded. The table shattered into kindling. Splinters filled the air like shrapnel. Framed in the jagged doorway, backlit by the swirling snow, was Kaelen. He was immense. Even in human form, his alpha power radiated from him like heat from a forge. He stood well over 6.5 feet, his shoulders straining the seams of a simple black thermal shirt. Dark jeans and heavy boots were dusted with snow. His hair, the color of raven wings, was swept back from a face that was all harsh, unforgiving angles. A blade of a nose, a sharp jaw shadowed with stubble, and eyes that glowed with a faint, amber light in the gloom. The eyes of his wolf, just beneath the surface. He stepped inside, and the cabin seemed to shrink. The air pressure changed, becoming heavy, charged. Elara's own wolf, the part of her she'd fought to suppress for months, stirred in a frantic, conflicting mix of terror and primal submission. It wanted to bare its throat. Her human soul wanted to claw his eyes out. He took a slow, deliberate breath, scenting the room, scenting her. A muscle ticked in his jaw. "You've been living like a rodent, smelling of despair and dirt. It offends me." "Everything offends you," she whispered, backing up until the rough stone of the fireplace pressed into her spine. "Except the smell of blood." He ignored the jab, his glowing gaze sweeping the barren room. "Where is he?" Elara blinked. "Who?" "The one who helped you," Kaelen said, his voice dropping to a lethal purr. "You couldn't have planned this alone. You couldn't have crossed the Bloodfin without a guide. Who was it? A rogue from the Broken Claw Pack. One of my own betas, dreaming of treason." He took a step closer, the floorboard groaning in protest. "Tell me his name, and your punishment will be swifter." A mystery hook, sharp and sudden. He thought she had an ally. What happened next changed everything, because in that moment I realized he wasn't just here for me. He was here for a ghost. She had no ally. She'd run alone, fueled only by desperation. But someone somewhere had left a trail of breadcrumbs for her to find, that old map left in her satchel. She'd never questioned it. Now the question screamed in her mind. "There is no one," she said, the truth firm on her tongue. "I am alone." Kaelen studied her face, looking for the lie. He must have seen only bewildered fear because his expression darkened with a different emotion, frustration. "You're lying, or you're a fool. The path you took is known only to a few. It's an old rogue trail from the last war." He was before her now, close enough for her to feel the heat radiating from his body, to smell the clean, wild scent of him beneath the frost. It was a scent that had once made her feel safe. Now it choked her. He reached out not to strike, but to touch a strand of her matted auburn hair. She flinched as if burned. His fingers paused, then curled into a fist, dropping back to his side. The rejection seemed to anger his wolf. The amber light in his eyes flared. "You will tell me," he stated, the command in his voice weaving through the air, an alpha compulsion that tugged at her will. It took every ounce of her strength not to open her mouth and babble nonsense just to please him. She bit her tongue until she tasted blood. "I have nothing," she ground out each word. His control snapped. In a blur of motion, his hand shot out and wrapped around her throat. Not squeezing, just holding, his thumb resting against the frantic pulse there. His touch was searing. "You have everything," he growled, the human cadence slipping, revealing the beast beneath. "You are mine. Your life, your breath, your wretched, disobedient heart, they belong to me, by the moon's decree and my own claim. And I am tired of chasing what is already mine." His words were a cage, but in his eyes, for a fleeting second, she saw something else. Not just possession, but a furious, bewildered pain. "Why did you leave me?" It was gone as quickly as it appeared, replaced by glacial certainty. The sound that broke the moment was not from them. It was a howl, long, mournful, and chillingly close. It wasn't a Silverfang howl. It was wilder, lonelier. A rogue's cry. Kaelen's head snapped toward the window, his grip loosening a fraction. A second howl answered from the opposite direction. Then a third. They were surrounded. A grim smile touched Kaelen's lips, but it held no warmth. "It seems no one has friends. The scavengers have caught the scent of a wounded Omega." He looked back at her, his gaze intense. "They'll tear you apart to get to the power in your blood, or worse, they'll try to keep you." The pack dynamics shifted in an instant. He was no longer just her hunter. He was an alpha whose claimed mate was threatened by rogues. A low, continuous growl erupted from his chest, a sound of pure, territorial wrath. The cabin walls vibrated with it. "Stay behind me," he commanded, shoving her roughly toward the fireplace. "Do not run. If you run, I will catch you, and then I will let them have you before I take you home." Elara stumbled, her mind reeling. Rogues here, drawn to her vulnerability like sharks to blood. Another mystery. Who were they? Why were they in this forgotten stretch of the Blackwood? Kaelen moved to the shattered doorway, a silhouette of lethal power. The howls were closer now, punctuated by the snap of branches and the soft, guttural sounds of wolves shifting, bones cracking and reforming in the shadows just beyond the tree line. The horror of transformation was happening out there in the dark. He began to unbutton his shirt, his movements methodical. "You wanted to see the wild, Elara. You wanted freedom from the pack." He shrugged the shirt off, his back a landscape of powerful muscle and old, silvery scars. He glanced over his shoulder, his eyes now fully wolf, blazing amber in the dark. "Tonight, you will learn the price of that freedom, and you will learn why you need an alpha." He stepped out into the whirling snow, and the change took him. It was not a slow, painful transformation. For an alpha of his power, it was a violent, swift unleashing. The sound was visceral, a symphony of cracking bones, tearing ligaments, and a deep, groaning shudder of flesh and fur erupting from his skin. It was ecstasy and agony fused into one terrifying moment of power. His human form was consumed, replaced in seconds by a wolf of monstrous size. His fur was jet black, tipped with silver like frost, and his eyes were twin coals of intelligent, ancient fury. He threw his head back and unleashed a howl that shook the snow from the branches. A declaration of sovereignty, a challenge, and a warning. The Alpha King had come, and he would paint the snow red for her. From the woods, 3 lean, mangy-looking wolves emerged, their coats matted, their eyes gleaming with feral hunger. Rogues, outcasts. They fanned out, circling the giant black wolf that stood between them and the cabin. Inside, pressed against cold stone, Elara watched, her heart a trapped, frantic thing in her chest. This was her fault. Their blood would be on her hands. Kaelen would kill them all, and then he would take her back. That was my first mistake, thinking I could outrun him. My second mistake was believing this cabin was a sanctuary. But my third, and most terrible mistake, was just about to happen. As the black wolf launched himself at the nearest rogue with a sound like thunder, Elara's eyes darted to the deep shadows at the back of the cabin. There, in the corner where the roof had partially collapsed, was a hole. A way out. The rogues were a distraction. A deadly, bloody distraction. Kaelen was occupied. The snow was falling harder, covering tracks. It was a suicide run. The rogues in the woods, the Alpha at the door, the freezing wilderness beyond. But it was a chance. With one last look at the titanic struggle unfolding in the clearing, the black wolf a whirlwind of destruction, a rogue's yelp of pain cutting through the night. Elara turned, scrambled over the fallen rubble, and slipped out into the blinding, silent white of the Blackwood, leaving the sounds of the fight and the Alpha King behind. She didn't see the fourth set of eyes, not wolf, but keenly intelligent, watching her escape from a high ridge. She didn't hear the soft, satisfied click of a tongue, and she had no idea that her flight was not an escape at all, but the next move in a game she didn't even know she was playing. All she knew was the cold, the dark, and the desperate, pounding rhythm of her own heart as she vanished into the storm. The Alpha King's furious, betrayed roar echoing through the trees behind her, promising a reckoning that would shake the very foundations of the packs. The last sound Elara heard before the storm swallowed her was the savage snarl of Kaelen's wolf, the wet tear of flesh, and the agonized yelp of a rogue. She didn't look back. She ran. Her human feet, bare and bleeding, punched through the crust of snow into the icy mud beneath. Each gasp was a knife in her lungs, the frozen air stealing her breath. The blizzard, her ally and her jailer, whipped around her, a blinding, howling wall of white. She could see nothing beyond 10 feet. The trees were gray ghosts, the sky a churning void. She ran on instinct, on the desperate animal need to put distance between herself and the carnage at the cabin. He's fighting them. He's killing them. For you, the thought was a poison. It wasn't protection, it was a brand. He was defending his property. Never, she rasped into the wind, the vow ripped from her raw throat. I am not yours. But the wilderness had its own answer. The Blackwood was not empty. As the immediate terror of Kaelen's capture faded, a deeper, more primal fear seeped in. She was an omega in the open, a flickering, untethered beacon of submissive power in a forest ruled by hunger and tooth. Every shadow between the pines seemed to hold a pair of feral eyes. Every crack of a branch was a footfall. She stumbled, falling to her knees in a deep drift. The cold was a shock, a brutal clarity. She couldn't run like this, not as a human. She was too slow, too fragile. But to shift, to call on her wolf form here, now it would be like lighting a signal fire. Kaelen would sense the surge of her power. Any rogue within miles would catch her scent on the wind. It was a terrible gamble. But if you stay human, you'll freeze to death before dawn. Gritting her teeth, Elara forced her body to obey. The shift was agony, a clumsy, wrenching transformation without the safe, guided channel of a pack link. Bones cracked and reknitted, Fur sprouted from searing skin. It was a silent scream, lost in the storm's roar. When it was done, she lay panting in the snow, a small, silver-gray wolf with eyes the color of winter twilight. Her senses exploded. The world sharpened into a tapestry of scent and sound. She could smell the iron-rich blood from the cabin, miles behind her now but still pungent. She could smell the pine sap, the frozen earth, the distant trace of a hare. And underneath it all, the musky, unwashed stench of rogue. Not one, many. Their trails crisscrossed the forest like foul threads. Her omega wolf whined low in her throat. The instinct to seek the strongest protector, to submit and be safe, was a physical ache. She violently suppressed it. That instinct had led her to Kaelen. It had made her believe his claiming was a blessing. She knew better now. Safety was an illusion. Freedom was this cold, terrifying loneliness. She pushed to her paws, her body lighter, faster, already warmer. She had to find shelter. A real shelter, not a death trap like the cabin. The map she'd used was a lie, a trap within a trap. Kaelen was right. Someone had helped her escape, only to steer her into a different kind of cage. Who and why? The questions were a gnawing distraction. She couldn't afford them now. For hours, she moved, a gray specter against the white. She followed the contour of the land, moving downhill, hoping to find a ravine, a cave, anything. The storm began to relent, the snow fading to a gentle, deadly fall. The silence that followed was worse. It was a listening silence. That's when she heard it, not with her ears, but in the hollow place where her pack link had once been. A faint, discordant pulse, not the ordered, commanding broadcast of an alpha like Kaelen. This was a ragged, hungry call, an omega call, but it was wrong, twisted. It wasn't a call for comfort, it was a lure. Elara froze, her hackles rising. It came from ahead and to the left. A siren song of helplessness that made her own wolf want to run toward it to offer solace. But her human mind recoiled. Omegas didn't broadcast like that, not unless they were in utter, mind-shattering distress. Or unless it wasn't an omega at all. It's a trap, a rogue trick. She backed away, turning sharply to the right, plunging into a thicket of brambles that tore at her fur. She had to get away from that sound. But the forest had other plans. The land dipped suddenly into a narrow, rocky gully. At its base, sheltered by an overhang, was the mouth of a cave. And from within, a soft, golden light flickered. Fire. The scent hit her next. Wood smoke, yes, but also rabbit cooking. And wolf. A single wolf. Not the feral stench of the rogues, but a cleaner, lonelier scent. Her stomach cramped with hunger. Her body, pushed beyond its limits, screamed at the promise of warmth and food. This was madness. It could be another trap. But the alternative was a slow death in the snow. And that pulsing, false omega call was still echoing at the edge of her senses, drawing closer. She had to choose a danger. Crouching low, Elara crept to the edge of the cave mouth. She peered inside. The cave was shallow but deep enough for shelter. A small fire crackled in a ring of stones. A skinned rabbit roasted on a spit. And sitting with his back against the wall, sharpening a knife on a stone, was a man. He wasn't Kaelen. That was her first, dizzying thought. He was lean where Kaelen was broad, all coiled tension rather than overt power. His hair was dark and unruly, falling over a face that was all sharp angles and guarded eyes. He wore worn leathers, and a long, nasty scar ran from his temple down to his jaw. He didn't look up. "You can stop lurking," he said, his voice a low, gravelly rumble that held no warmth, but no immediate threat either. "The wind's been telling me your story for the last 5 minutes. Silverfang, Omega, running scared." Elara's heart hammered against her ribs. She shifted, the transformation quicker this time, and stood shivering in her torn dress at the entrance. "How do you know that?" He finally glanced up. His eyes were a strange, tawny color like old amber. They swept over her, assessing, missing nothing, the torn dress, the bloody feet, the wild fear in her eyes. The Silverfangs have a particular stink of arrogance. And you're broadcasting, pray, so loud it's a miracle the whole broken claw hasn't descended on you. He nodded toward the fire. Sit, eat, before you collapse and I have to drag your body out. His words were harsh, but the offer was there. Wary, every muscle taut, Elara edged into the cave. The heat from the fire was a blissful agony on her frozen skin. She sat as far from him as possible, pulling her knees to her chest. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice barely a whisper. "A ghost," he said simply, turning the rabbit. "Call me Rylan, and you're the Alpha King's missing prize. The whole forest is buzzing with it." The rabbit fat dripped into the fire, hissing. Elara flinched. "I'm no one's prize." Rylan's mouth quirked, a humorless shadow of a smile. "Tell that to Kaelen. He's turned the Blackwood inside out looking for you. Killed 3 rogues back at the old ranger cabin. Messy business." So he knew. He'd been watching. "Are you a rogue?" "I'm alone," he corrected, a world of difference in the words. He sliced a hindquarter off the rabbit and tossed it to her. She caught it on instinct, the hot, greasy meat burning her fingers. She didn't care. She devoured it, the flavor almost making her weep. "Rogues run in packs," he continued, watching her eat. "Desperate, stupid packs. I'm not desperate, and I'm not stupid." "Then why help me?" she asked between bites, suspicion overriding gratitude. "I didn't say I was helping you. I'm sharing a meal. Tomorrow you go your way, I go mine." His tawny eyes held hers. "But if you want advice from a ghost, you're running the wrong way. Deeper into Blackwood is Broken Claw territory. And they've been waiting for a gift like you." The meat turned to ash in her mouth. The Broken Claw, the rival pack Kaelen had mentioned. A pack of outcasts and savages, he'd said. "I don't have a choice," she said, defiance sparking. "I can't go back." "There's always a choice," Rylan said, his tone final. He went back to sharpening his knife. The rhythmic scrape-scrape filled the cave. For a long time, there was only the sound of the fire and the knife. Elara's eyelids grew heavy, the warmth and food pulling her toward a sleep she desperately needed but couldn't afford. "The map," she mumbled, half in a doze. "Someone left me a map to that cabin. Kaelen thinks a beta helped me." The scraping stopped. Elara's eyes snapped open. Rylan was utterly still, his gaze fixed on the blade. The firelight danced in his eyes, turning them molten. "What did you say?" The gravel in his voice had hardened to flint. "A map," Elara repeated, suddenly more awake. "It showed the old rogue trails. It was how I got past the border patrols. Kaelen said only a beta or a former beta would know those paths." Rylan was on his feet in a movement so fluid it was like smoke. He towered over her, his earlier nonchalance gone, replaced by a fierce, focused intensity that stole the air from the cave. "Describe it. The map." Startled, Elara stammered. It was on parchment. Torn, the ink was faded. There was a mark, a crescent moon with a crack through it, near the cabin's symbol. A low, vicious curse ripped from Rylan's throat. He turned away, running a hand through his dark hair. The scar on his face seemed to pulse in the firelight. "You were led to slaughter Little Omega. That wasn't a map to freedom. It was a receipt. What are you talking about?" Elara stood, fear giving her strength. He turned back, his expression grim. "The crescent and crack, that's the mark of a traitor beta who sold secrets to the Broken Claw a decade ago. He was executed for it, by Kaelen himself." He took a step closer, his scent pine and cold stone washing over her. "Who gave you the map?" "I found it, in my cell after a correction. It was just there." The horror was dawning, cold and sickening. "You mean someone in the Silverfang Pack wants me dead, or wants the Broken Claw to have me?" "Worse," Rylan whispered, his eyes darting to the cave entrance as if he could see through the night. They want a war. An Omega of the Silverfang Pack, kidnapped and defiled by the broken claw. It's the oldest provocation in the book. Kaelen would have to retaliate. He'd have to raze them to the ground. It would be a bloodbath that would weaken both packs, leaving an opening. He trailed off, but the implication hung in the air. An opening for someone else. The pieces, jagged and terrible, began to click into place in Elara's mind. Her escape wasn't just her rebellion. It was a move in a game she never knew she was playing. A pawn. She had always been a pawn. We have to move. Now, Rylan began kicking dirt onto the fire, smothering the light. Why? What's happening? That Omega call you've been trying to ignore, he said, his voice tight. It's stopped being a call. It's a tracking signal. And it's right outside. A howl tore through the night. Not the powerful, declarative cry of a pack wolf, but a ragged, multi-throated chorus of hunger. It was answered from another direction, then another. They were surrounded. Rylan shifted in a blur of motion, becoming a large, smoke-gray wolf with those same tawny, intelligent eyes. He looked at her, then at the back of the cave. It wasn't a dead end. A narrow fissure, almost invisible in the dark, led deeper into the rock. Scrape, scuffle, a wet sniff at the cave entrance. The rogues were here. Rylan nudged her toward the fissure. It was a tight squeeze, a pitch-black throat of stone. He was offering her a way out. But why? He was a ghost. He owed her nothing. Another snarl closer. The first rogue, a hulking, mangy beast, appeared at the cave mouth, saliva dripping from its jaws. Its eyes locked on Elara. If only she had known then that the map was just the beginning of the betrayal. That the real trap wasn't the cabin, or the rogues, but the carefully laid path of an enemy hidden in plain sight. What happened next in that dark, stony gullet would change everything. Rylan let out a warning growl, placing himself between her and the entrance. The rogue pack leader, a massive brute with one milky eye, stepped into the fading firelight. It didn't look at Rylan. It stared straight at Elara, and in a grating, half-human voice, it spoke. The broken claw sends its regards, little Omega. The beta said you'd be coming this way. Then it lunged. The rogue's voice, a gravelly snarl from the cave mouth, hung in the frigid air. The broken claw expects you, little Omega. The beta foretold your path. If only I had known then how deep the betrayal ran. What happened next changed everything. The world erupted into snarls and the thunder of paws on stone. Shadows lunged from the blizzard's veil into the firelight's flickering ring. Rylan moved first. He didn't shift. He simply stepped in front of me, a low, warning growl rumbling from his human throat, a sound that spoke of old violence. The fissure! Now, he commanded, his voice a blade of ice. But now, Elara. A rogue, a hulking gray wolf with froth on its jaws, sprang. Rylan met it not with tooth and claw, but with brutal efficiency. He sidestepped, grabbed a heavy, fire-blackened branch from the ground, and swung. The crack of wood against skull was sickening, a wet, dense thud that echoed off the cave walls. The gray wolf yelped and crumpled. Two more poured in behind it. I scrambled backward, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs. The narrow fissure at the rear of the cave was a dark, uninviting slit in the rock. It smelled of damp stone and age. A trap, or the only chance. The heat of the fire at my back, the cold promise of the fissure ahead, the cacophony of the fight, my senses screamed. Rylan was a whirlwind of controlled fury, using the terrain, the fire, the branch. He wasn't trying to kill them, I realized. He was holding the line, buying seconds, for me. Go! He roared, parrying a snap of teeth with the branch. A claw raked his forearm, and the coppery scent of his blood joined the smoke. I didn't think, I shifted. The world simplified into scent and survival. My smaller, lighter wolf form slipped into the fissure. It was a tight, crushing squeeze, my fur scraping against rough stone. Darkness swallowed me, absolute and suffocating. Behind, the sounds of the fight grew muffled, then distant. I pushed forward, blind, driven by panic. The tunnel seemed to press in, a stone throat trying to swallow me whole. I whimpered, a tiny sound lost in the rock. Then a draft. A faint, cold thread of outside air carrying the clean, sharp scent of pine and snow. I followed it, my paws scraping, until the fissure widened abruptly, and I tumbled out into a shallow, snow-filled gully, hidden from the cave mouth by a thick curtain of thorny brambles. I was out. I was alone. The silence was immediate and profound, broken only by the whisper of falling snow and the distant, fading snarls from the other side of the rock face. Guilt, hot and acidic, burned my throat. I'd left him. I'd run, again. He told you to run, my mind reasoned. He knew the plan. But the memory of his blood on the air haunted me. I huddled in the gully, my white coat trembling against the snow, listening. The fight sounds stopped. No triumphant howls. No sounds of pursuit. Just the endless, waiting quiet of the Blackwood. Minutes stretched. The cold began to bite through my fur. I couldn't stay here. I was exposed. Shifting back to my human form was agony. The cold seized my naked skin like 1,000 needles. I fumbled with the damp, torn clothes from my pack, my fingers clumsy and numb. Every rustle of wind through the pines sounded like an approaching enemy. Every shadow held Kaelen's golden eyes. I had to move. But where? The map was a death sentence. The cabin was a battleground. The cave was compromised. I was a piece on a board, and players I couldn't see were making their moves. A soft crunch of snow. I froze, mid-button, my breath catching. The sound came from up the gully, away from the cave. Slow, deliberate. I sank down, trying to make myself small against the dark rock. A lean, familiar silhouette appeared, moving with a slight limp. Rylan. He had a fresh, bleeding gash on his temple, and his clothes were torn, but he moved with the same alert, guarded grace. His eyes scanned the gully, missing nothing, until they landed on me. He didn't smile. He just gave a short, sharp nod. "They'll circle around. Can't stay," he said, his voice a low rasp. He tossed a small, wrapped bundle at my feet, dried meat. "Eat, walk." "You're hurt," I whispered, clutching the food. "It's nothing. The fissure exits in 3 places. They'll check them all. We have maybe 10 minutes. He turned, expecting me to follow. I didn't move. "Why are you doing this? You said you wouldn't help me." He stopped, his back tense. He didn't look at me. "I'm not helping you. I'm spitting in the eye of the bastard who's trying to burn this forest down with his schemes. Now move your feet or become the spark that starts the war. Your choice." The bluntness was a slap. It was also, perversely, reassuring. No false promises. No hidden agenda I could discern, other than a clear, personal hatred for the conspirator. I shoved the meat in my mouth, the salty flavor a shock to my system, and stumbled after him. We moved like ghosts through the Blackwood. Rylan set a punishing pace, his knowledge of the land absolute. He avoided trails, instead choosing game paths, frozen creek beds, and dense thickets of undergrowth that clawed at our clothes. The blizzard had softened to a steady, silent fall. The world was muffled in white, our footprints filling behind us. After an hour of silent, grueling travel, he slowed beside a massive, lightning-blasted oak. He placed a hand on the blackened bark, listening. The only sound was the plop of snow falling from branches. "We'll rest here." "Briefly," he said, finally looking at me. His gaze was assessing, clinical. "You need to understand what you're in. The rogue at the cave, he wasn't just a scavenger. He was a broken claw scout, sent to intercept you." I leaned against the frozen tree, my legs shaking. Because the beta, the traitor's map, the map was a beacon. It led you right to a broken claw patrol route. Standard tactic of the executed beta, sell the movement of high-value pack members to the highest bidder. In this case, you, an Omega who belongs to the Alpha King, are the ultimate prize. He pulled a water skin from his pack, took a swig, and offered it to me. The current conspirator used the old method, but with a new goal. They don't want ransom, they want a casus belli. The term was cold, formal, deadly. They want me dead in Broken Claw territory. Or taken, Rylan corrected, his eyes hard. A captured Omega, a violation of the most sacred pack law. Kaelen would be obligated by tradition and pride to retaliate with full force. The Broken Claw, savage as they are, would fight to the last. Both alphas would bleed their packs dry. And in the aftermath, with power vacuums and chaos, he trailed off, his meaning clear. Someone rises, I finished, the pieces clicking into a horrifying mosaic. Someone from Silverfang, Rylan gave a grim nod. A challenger to Kaelen's throne, or an ally of the Broken Claw looking to expand. The motive is power. You are just the instrument. The weight of it crushed the air from my lungs. My escape, my desperate bid for freedom, was never mine at all. It was a lever in a machine designed for slaughter. I felt sick. Who in Silverfang would do this? He shrugged, a tight, frustrated movement. A jealous beta, a disgruntled elder, a rival alpha from an allied pack whispering in someone's ear. The point is, Elara, you cannot go back. And you cannot go forward. The Broken Claw is waiting. Kaelen is hunting. And the traitor is watching, guiding both sides toward you. Hopelessness, a colder chill than the snow, seeped into my bones. So what do I do? Just disappear. For now, he looked away into the dense trees. There's a place, an old watchpost from a time before the packs carved up this land. It's off any current map. Even the rogues avoid it. Superstition. He glanced back, his expression unreadable. I can take you there. You can hide, recover your strength, decide what comes next. Suspicion, worn smooth by exhaustion, surfaced again. Why there? Why would you know such a place? A long pause. The wind sighed through the pines, a lonely sound. When he spoke, his voice was quieter, stripped of its earlier sharpness. Because it's where I went when I had nowhere else to go. The admission hung between us. He wasn't just a solitary wolf. He was an exile, a former beta, perhaps. The pieces of him were jagged and didn't fit. He offered no more, and I knew better than to ask. And after, I pressed. You'll leave me there? Yes, the word was final. My business is with the one who planted that map, not with you. It was a threadbare safety, but it was all I had. I nodded, too tired to argue. Okay. We moved again. The landscape grew rougher, the hills steeper. The watchpost, when we finally reached it as dusk bled the last light from the sky, was not a building. It was the skeleton of one. A single, square stone tower, crumbled at the top, nestled against a sheer cliff face. Vines and moss clung to its stones. The entrance was a dark archway, like a missing tooth. It smelled of old dust, wet stone, and something else, a faint, metallic tang I couldn't place. It's secure, Rylan said, striding inside without hesitation. The upper floors are gone, but the lower chamber is sound. No one comes here. I followed him in. The interior was one circular room, a fireplace carved into the far wall. Old, dry wood was stacked neatly beside it. A single, narrow window slit looked out over the descending forest. It was a tomb, but a defensible one. Rylan built a fire with quick, efficient movements. As the flames grew, pushing back the deep shadows, I saw the walls were not bare stone. Faded markings were etched into them, old pack sigils, warning runes, tallies of days or kills. History was written here in stone and fear. He handed me more food, a hard biscuit and a wedge of cheese, and sat on the opposite side of the fire, cleaning the cut on his arm with a strip of cloth and water from his skin. The silence wasn't comfortable, but it was no longer hostile. It was the quiet of two wounded animals sharing a den. "Thank you," I said, the words feeling inadequate. He just grunted, not looking up. The warmth of the fire began to thaw the icy knot in my chest. With it came a dangerous thing, a flicker of thought beyond mere survival. "The rogue said the beta foretold your path." Not a beta. The beta, as if it's a title. Ryland's hands stilled. He looked into the fire, his face a mask of grim shadows. The traitor beta who was executed, his methods were unique. He had a network, a way of moving information. Calling himself the beta was his signature. His disciples might use the same term. A disciple, a follower, still active a decade later. The conspiracy had roots deep and old. Before I could process it, a sound sliced through the night. It was not a howl. It was a note, pure and clear and devastatingly familiar, blown on a silver whistle. The sound carried on the cold air, piercing the stone walls of the watchpost as if they were paper. My blood turned to ice. My biscuit fell from nerveless fingers. Kaelen, he only used that whistle for one thing, to call me, to summon his Omega. It was a sound that had preceded both gentle moments and brutal corrections. It was a hook in my very soul. The note came again, closer this time. A commanding, urgent summons that vibrated in my bones. He was in the Blackwood. He was near. Ryland was on his feet in an instant, the firelight dancing in his alarmed eyes. "He's tracking the whistle's resonance. Your bond. I renounced it," I hissed, clapping my hands over my ears as if that could block it out. "It doesn't care," he said, moving to the window slit. "He's hunting, and he's not alone." A third note, this one edged with impatience, with rising anger. It was followed by another sound, one that raised the hair on my arms. The distant, coordinated howls of Silverfang warriors, spreading out, forming a net. They were still far, but they were moving fast. They had the scent. I looked at Ryland, panic a live wire in my veins. The watchpost was secure, but it was also a stone trap. If they surrounded it, he read my face. "There's a way out. A passage in the cliff face behind this tower. It leads down to underground streams. It's treacherous. It might be flooded." The whistle screamed again, so close now I could feel it in my teeth. It was a sound of possession, of inevitable recapture. The howls were answering, tightening the noose. "We have to go," I said, my voice trembling. Ryland nodded, kicking dirt over the fire, plunging us into near darkness. He moved to the rear wall, his hands searching the etched markings. "Help me find it. A crescent moon with a crack through it." The traitor's sigil. My fingers scrambled over the cold stone, tracing ancient grooves. The whistle blasted again, now accompanied by the sound of heavy paws crunching through the frozen undergrowth at the tree line. They were here. "Found it!" Ryland hissed. He pressed the cracked crescent. With a grating rumble of stone on stone, a section of the wall slid inward, revealing a yawning black maw that exhaled a breath of damp, frigid air. The passage. A triumphant, earth-shaking roar split the night, not a howl, but a raw, alpha command of pure fury. It was Kaelen, and he was at the base of the tower. "Geo!" Ryland shoved me into the darkness. I stumbled into the pitch-black passage. I heard the scrape of the stone door beginning to close behind us, and then, from the chamber we just fled, the splintering crash of the old wooden entrance door being demolished. Kaelen's voice, thunderous and terrifyingly close, echoed into the passage just before the stone sealed shut. "I know you're in here, little wolf, and I know you're not alone." The stone door clicked shut, leaving us in absolute blackness. but his final words, dripping with lethal promise, seeped through the rock after us. Run. It only makes the catching sweeter. We were in the dark, with a king at our backs, and no idea what lay ahead. The thunder of Kaelen's fury echoed through the stone passage behind them, a promise carved from rage. If only I had known then that the true darkness wasn't behind us, but waiting ahead in the silent, swallowing dark. Elara stumbled, her hand ripped from Ryland's as the ground vanished into icy water. She gasped, the shock stealing her breath. The hidden passage hadn't led to a tunnel, but into a flooded cavern. Freezing water, black as ink, rose to her chest. The only sound was their ragged breathing and the distant, furious roar of the Alpha King, muffled by stone. "Move," Ryland hissed, his voice tight. "The water flows. There must be an outlet. Stay close to the wall." He was a shadow against deeper shadow, feeling his way along the rough, slime-covered stone. Elara followed, the cold seeping into her bones, her exhausted muscles screaming. Every splash sounded like a cannon shot in the enclosed space. She could feel the phantom pull of the silver whistle, a sickening tug in her core that made her want to retch. He was using their bond like a fishing line, reeling her in by her own soul. "He'll follow," she whispered, the words trembling. "The water, our scent. The water is cold and moving. It will confuse the trail," Ryland said, but his confidence sounded thin. "And he's an alpha, not a fish. He'll have to find another way in or go around. It buys us time." They waited for what felt like hours, the water level fluctuating, sometimes dropping to their knees, sometimes forcing them to swim short, panicked stretches. The air grew thick and stale. Elara's mind raced with what Ryland had revealed. A traitor in Silverfang, a war plot. She was a pawn, her freedom never anything but an illusion in someone else's game. Finally, a faint, gray light filtered from ahead. It wasn't sunlight, but the reflected glow of moonlight on water. The cavern opened into a narrow, rocky channel, half caved in, with the night sky visible high above through a crack in the mountain. A small, icy stream flowed out into the open Blackwood. Ryland held up a hand, signaling silence. He listened, his head tilted, every scar on his face etched by the weak light. After a long minute, he gave a sharp nod. "Clear. For now." They hauled themselves out of the water, shivering violently on the rocky bank. The forest here was dense, ancient pines groaning in a high wind. They were deep, deep in the Blackwood. Elara wrapped her arms around herself, her teeth chattering. "Where now? The watch post is compromised. He knows we're here." Ryland was scanning the trees, his body tense. "He knows we were there. This stream exits miles from the tower. We keep moving. There's a place, an old place. Not on any pack map. Another trap." The words were out before she could stop them, bitterness lacing them. He looked at her, his eyes glinting. "We're in a trap, little wolf. The whole forest is a trap. I'm just trying to find the corner with the fewest teeth." He started moving, a silent phantom between the trees. "Stay low. And quiet." They moved like ghosts, Ryland setting a punishing pace. Elara's body was a tapestry of pain, the cold, the exhaustion, the deep, psychic bruise of the silver whistle. But fear was a potent fuel. Every rustle was a scout, every snap of a twig was Kaelen's footfall. What happened next changed everything. They were skirting a ridge when the wind shifted, carrying voices. "Found the tower. Alpha's rage is biblical. He split the hunt. Half are scouring the riverbanks downstream. And the other half, heading deeper. He's convinced the rogue is helping her. Thinks they'll try for the broken claw border to throw us off." Elara froze, pressing herself against the rough bark of a pine. Silverfang warriors. 2 of them, downwind and just below the ridge. Ryland was a statue beside her, his hand resting on the hilt of a knife she hadn't known he carried. Fool's errand, the second voice grumbled. No one crosses into Broken Claw territory and lives. If she's there, she's already dead. Saves us the trouble. Don't let the Alpha King hear you say that. He wants her back. Alive. Says she belongs to him. A low chuckle. He always was possessive of that one. Strange for an Omega, never understood it. The voices began to fade, moving away. Elara let out a shuddering breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Belongs to him. The words were a brand. Ryland's voice was a whisper in her ear. They're wrong. The best place to hide is where the hunter refuses to look. We're not going toward Broken Claw territory. He pointed away from the retreating voices, toward a particularly dark, tangled section of forest where the mountainside grew steep and jagged. We're going into it. Her blood ran colder than the stream. You're insane. You heard them. It's suicide. Staying here is a slower suicide, he countered, his gaze relentless. Kaelen's hunters are methodical. They'll grid this forest. But even Silverfang warriors won't patrol a line they believe is certain death. The borderlands are a no-man's land. Savage, but empty. It's our only chance to break the hunt and lose the Bondwhistle's trail. The logic was terrifyingly sound. To escape a monster, you had to run toward the abyss. She gave a stiff, helpless nod. The forest changed as they traveled. The pines grew twisted, their branches like claws. An eerie silence descended, broken not by animals, but by the strange, groaning shift of rocks and the occasional distant, unidentifiable screech. The scent markers were all wrong. A chaotic, aggressive mix of old rot and predatory musk that was neither pure Silverfang nor distinctly Broken Claw. It was the scent of pure, feral wildness. Ryland moved with even more caution here, his eyes constantly tracking the shadows. He stopped them at the edge of a clearing dominated by a massive, lightning-shattered stump. "We rest here. 5 minutes," he said, his voice barely audible. He didn't sit, remaining standing, a sentinel against the gloom. Elara sank down, her body grateful for the respite. The despair she'd held at bay began to creep in. "This conspirator, the one using the traitor Beta's sigil, you said you had a vendetta." Why? Ryland was silent for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. He stared into the oppressive trees, his jaw working. "The traitor Beta they executed a decade ago," he began, each word measured and heavy. "His name was Thuron. He wasn't just a Beta, he was my brother." Elara's breath caught. The revelation landed like a physical blow. "I was a warrior of Silverfang then," he continued, his voice devoid of emotion, a stark contrast to the pain in his eyes. "I believed in the pack, in Kaelen's strength. When the evidence was presented, secret meetings, stolen territory maps, communications with Broken Claw, it was irrefutable. I stood with the pack during his execution. I believed it was justice." He finally looked at her, and the raw, decade-old torment there was staggering. "But after, things didn't add up. The secrets sold were too minor to warrant the risk. The Broken Claw gains were negligible. It was like a performance. I started asking questions, and I became a problem. I was challenged, defeated, and exiled for insubordination and defective loyalty. Kaelen himself ripped my pack bonds away." "You think he was framed?" Elara whispered. "I know he was," Ryland spat. "Whoever is using his methods, his sigil, now it's proof. They're finishing whatever game they started back then. They used Thuron as a scapegoat, and now they're using you. I don't care about pack wars or thrones, but I will find the snake who killed my brother, and helping you, it seems, is the way to draw them out." Before Elara could process this, a new sound cut through the silence. Not a howl, not a whistle, a click, then a low, rhythmic, metallic scraping, like a blade being slowly dragged over stone. It came from the far side of the clearing. Rylan instantly shifted position, putting himself between Elara and the sound. His knife was in his hand. From the tangled undergrowth, a figure emerged. It was not a wolf, but a man lean, dressed in patched, filthy hides. His hair was matted, his face obscured by grime and a wild beard. But his eyes were sharp, intelligent, and utterly mad. In one hand, he held a notched, rusted axe. With the other, he was deliberately scraping it along a rock, producing that terrifying sound. "Well, well," the man crooned, his voice a dry rustle. "Look what the dark dragged in, a lost little pup and a broken one." His gaze fixed on Ryland's scars. "You smell of exile. And you," he sniffed the air, his eyes widening with a horrible delight as he looked at Elara. "You smell of him, the Silver King, and of fear, oh, such sweet omega fear." Ryland didn't speak. He just settled into a fighter's crouch. "This is my patch," the man hissed, stopping his scraping. "My teeth, my meat. You're trespassing on the table of the mad." More figures detached from the shadows. 3, 4, 5, all in similar states of feral decay. Rogues, but not like the hungry ones from the cabin or the cave. These were settled, territorial, and utterly unhinged. "We're just passing through," Ryland said, his voice flat and dangerous. "No quarrel with you. Everything here is a quarrel," the mad rogue shrieked, spittle flying. "The quarrel is the point. You give us the female, the omega, she's pretty bait. We'll string her up, let her scent call the king to our teeth. You can watch, or you can join the feast after." Elara's heart hammered against her ribs. This was it. The abyss had teeth, and they were smiling. Ryland's answer was a snarl that was more animal than man. "No!" The leader's grin split his filthy face. "Good!" He lunged. The clearing erupted into violence. Ryland met the axe with his knife, the clash of steel ringing in the silent wood. The other rogues circled, not joining immediately, watching their leader duel as if it were sport. They were toying with them. Elara scrambled back, searching for a weapon, a rock, anything. Ryland was a blur of motion, all desperate efficiency against the mad rogue's wild, powerful swings. But he was outnumbered, and the others were closing the circle. A rogue with a club broke from the ring and made for Elara. She stumbled, falling backward over a root. He loomed over her, his stench overwhelming, raising his weapon. A guttural roar, unlike any sound she'd ever heard, shook the very trees. It wasn't Kaelen. It was deeper, older, saturated with primal rage. The rogue above her froze, his eyes going wide with a fear that mirrored her own. From the deepest part of the border forest, a new pack emerged. They were huge, their fur a mix of mangy gray and dirty white, their eyes glowing with a vicious, yellow light. They moved not with the discipline of Silverfang, but with a terrifying, unified savagery. At their head was a massive, scarred wolf with a twisted paw, broken claw. The mad rogues forgot their prey instantly, turning as one to face the new, greater threat. Their leader screamed in fury. "My teeth!" The two feral groups collided in a whirlwind of snapping jaws and tearing claws. It was pure, chaotic carnage. Ryland didn't hesitate. He grabbed Elara's arm, yanking her to her feet. "Now, run." They fled not deeper into broken claw territory, but sideways, along the chaotic borderline, using the savage battle as cover. The sounds of slaughter followed them, a horrific symphony of snarls and screams. They ran until Elara's lungs were fire, finally collapsing in a hidden dip beneath the roots of a fallen giant. She sobbed for air, the adrenaline crash making her tremble uncontrollably. Rylan was bleeding from a shallow cut on his arm, his chest heaving. "We can't stop. The noise will draw every hunter for miles." But as Elara looked up, wiping mud and tears from her face, she saw it. Through a break in the trees, on a rise perhaps half a mile away, silhouetted against the moonlit sky, was a figure on horseback, flanked by others, watching the distant battle. Even at this distance, the aura of absolute, commanding power was unmistakable. Kaelen. He wasn't searching the riverbanks. He had come straight to the heart of the chaos, as if he'd known. He turned his head slowly, not toward the fighting, but scanning the forest, as if he could feel her. Then he raised the silver whistle to his lips once more. This time, no sound reached her ears, but a wave of pure, agonizing compulsion hit her like a physical force. It was a silent scream down the bond, a command woven of silver and will. Come to me. Her body jerked, a puppet on a string. A whimper escaped her throat as her muscles tensed, fighting against the overwhelming urge to stand, to walk, to go to him. Ryland saw it. He saw her struggle, saw her eyes glaze with forced obedience. He clamped a hand over her mouth, his own eyes wide with dawning horror. He's mastering the bond, fighting it. You have to fight it. Elara dug her fingers into the cold earth, her hole being a war zone. The Alpha's command was a tidal wave. Her own will was a crumbling sandcastle. Kaelen lowered the whistle. He pointed, not at the battle, but directly at their hiding place. And his howl of triumph split the night, calling his warriors to the kill. The command was a silent scream in her blood. Come to me. It wasn't a sound, but a compulsion, a physical yank on the tether she'd tried so desperately to sever. Elara's knees buckled. Her head snapped toward the distant tree line where Kaelen stood, a dark silhouette against the chaotic backdrop of the rogue battle. He wasn't howling. He was simply watching her, the silver whistle glinting in his hand. He had found the frequency of her soul, and he was dialing it in. Elara! Ryland's voice was a distant crackle over the static filling her mind. He grabbed her arm, his grip like iron. Fight it! It's just a pull, it's not a chain. But it felt like a chain, one hooked directly to her sternum, reeling her in. Every instinct screamed to obey, to run to her alpha, to her mate, to end the torment of resistance. The forest around her, the snarls of the broken claw wolves, the shrieks of the mad rogues, the pounding of her own heart, muffled into a dull roar. Only the command was clear. Come to me. He's using the bond, she gasped, her wolf whining pitifully inside her. He's calling it home. Then we make a new home, Ryland snarled, his eyes scanning the frenzy. The Broken Claw Patrol, a wedge of snarling, twisted-pawed wolves, was tearing through the rogues, driving the chaotic fight directly toward their position. The mad rogue himself was a whirlwind of claws, holding his ground against a massive, scarred, broken claw beast that could only be their alpha. It was a perfect, violent screen, and Kaelen's hunters would be closing in from the other side, summoned by that silent whistle. We can't go back the way we came, Ryland said, his mind working visibly, the strategist overriding the exile. And we can't go forward into that. He jerked his chin toward the melee. His gaze shot to the left, toward a steep, rocky slope choked with thorny brambles and deadfall. It looked impassable. There, now. He didn't wait for her agreement. He hauled her upright, half dragging her as her legs fought her, one wanting to flee toward Kaelen, the other wanting to flee with Ryland. The dissonance was a physical pain. A rogue, bleeding from a torn flank, lunged at them, driven by simple hunger. Ryland pivoted, a smooth, brutal motion, and his claws opened the creature's throat without breaking stride. The hot spray across Elara's face was a shock that cleared the mental fog for a second. Scent of copper, sound of gurgling, sensation of wet warmth. The world rushed back in. She found her feet, pushing against the ground, helping Ryland as they scrambled for the slope. Thorns ripped at her clothes and skin. Behind them, a unified, chilling howl rose, not the chaotic noise of the border skirmish, but the disciplined, hunting cry of the Silverfang elite. Kaelen had sounded the advance. Faster, little wolf, Rylan grunted, shoving a rotten log aside. They're on the run now, and we're the quarry. They clawed their way up the incline, dirt and stones skittering down behind them. The brambles formed a natural, painful barrier. If only it would be enough. At the top, the land dipped into a narrow, mist-filled gully where a cold stream trickled. The mist was a blessing, dampening their scent. "We can't stop," Elara panted, the come-to-me now a persistent thrum in her veins, a compass needle constantly twitching toward its north. "He's in my head, Rylan. He'll always know the direction." Rylan stopped, turning her to face him. His hands were on her shoulders, his eyes intense. "Listen to me. He knows the direction, not the terrain. He feels a pull, not a map. We use that. We go where an alpha king wouldn't dream of sending his polished hunters." "Where?" she asked, despair creeping in. "The map was a trap. The borderlands are a war zone. The rogues are feral. There's nowhere left." A grim, humorless smile touched his lips. "There's one place. The Broken Claw's den isn't just in the deep Blackwood, it's under it." Elara stared at him. "You're mad. We walk into their den." "We don't walk, we fall." He pointed downstream, where the mist thickened and the gully walls narrowed into a dark crack. "The stream goes underground there. It's a sinkhole that feeds into the cavern systems beneath Broken Claw territory. It's suicide for a pack wolf. They're too proud, too orderly. But for a rogue or a runaway," he met her eyes, "it's a possibility. The one place Kaelen's bond pull will be useless. Stone and deep earth block everything, even a mate bond." The idea was terrifying. To go down into the dark, into the territory of the most savage pack, to escape the hunter above. It was a choice between two certain deaths and one uncertain, terrifying chance. Another Silverfang howl, closer this time. They were methodically working the bramble slope. "Why?" she breathed, the question she'd been too scared to ask finally surfacing. "Why are you doing this? You said you wouldn't help me. You said it was just to spite the conspirator." Rylan's jaw tightened. The sounds of the forest, the distant battle, the approaching hunters, the trickle of the stream filled the heavy silence. "My brother Thuron was a good beta. He was loyal. He believed in the sanctity of the pack. Someone framed him. Someone high up, who knew his routines, who had access to his seals, who could plant evidence of dealings with the Broken Claw." His voice was low, venomous. "Kaelen executed him for treason. I spoke in his defense. I was exiled for my blind loyalty." "My mate?" He stopped, the word hanging in the air, a raw, unhealed wound. "She was encouraged to renounce me, by the same person, I believe. The one who now uses Thuron's old methods, his sigil. The disciple." The revelation hit Elara like a physical blow. It wasn't just about politics or power. It was about vengeance for a stolen family, a stolen life. Rylan wasn't just an exile. He was a ghost haunting his own past, and the conspirator was the one who'd made him that way. "You think helping me expose them will clear Thuron's name," she whispered. "I know it will," he said. "Because you're the key. You're the prize they want to use to start their war. If you disappear into the earth, their plan fails. If you survive, you carry the truth, a living witness. Kaelen would never listen to me, but he might listen to his own Omega if she's holding the name of the wolf who played him for a fool." It was a colossal gamble, a web of ifs, but it was a purpose, a reason to keep moving beyond sheer survival. He was offering her a role in his vengeance, and in doing so, giving her a weapon. "Come to me." The pull sharpened, a stabbing insistence. She clutched her chest. "They're close." Rylan nodded toward the dark crack in the earth. "Then we stop talking and start falling. Stay close. The current is swift and the tunnels branch. If we get separated down there, we're both dead." He didn't wait. He slid down the muddy bank into the icy, knee-deep stream and waded into the thickening mist, toward the mouth of the sinkhole. It yawned like a stone throat, exhaling a breath of damp, mineral-scented air. The sound of the water became a hollow echo. Elara took one last look back up the gully. She couldn't see them, but she could feel Kaelen's presence, a storm of fury and possession drawing nearer. He would burn the entire Blackwood to find her. He would wage his war on the broken claw regardless. She was just the catalyst. She turned her back on the surface world, on the alpha, on the sky, and stepped into the stream. The icy water stole her breath. The mist swallowed her. The last thing she heard from the world above was the triumphant howl of a Silverfang hunter cresting the ridge. Then, darkness. The plunge was sudden. The stream bed fell away, and she was in free-fall, water roaring in her ears, for a heart-stopping second before she hit a churning pool. The cold was absolute, a shock that burned. She surfaced, gasping, flailing in the utter blackness. "Here!" Ryland's voice echoed weirdly off the walls. Her hand struck stone, then found his arm. He pulled her against a slippery ledge. "Cave, breathe." They clung there, panting, the roar of the falling water a constant thunder. As her eyes adjusted, she saw the faintest phosphorescent glow from lichen on the walls, painting the cavern in ghostly blues and greens. They were in a vast cathedral-like space. The air was still and ancient, and the pull it was gone, muffled, distant as if heard through a thick wall. A sob of relief choked her. "It's quieter," she stammered, her teeth chattering. "Told you," Ryland said, his own voice hushed in the monumental space. "Stone is the bond's enemy, but we have new problems." He pointed across the underground lake. Several dark openings led away into deeper blackness. "We need to move. This chamber is too open. They won't follow us down the waterfall, but if they find another entrance." He helped her onto the ledge, and they began picking their way along the cavern wall, feet slipping on wet stone. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the distant water and the drip-drip from stalactites. It felt like the belly of the world. "How do you know these tunnels?" Elara whispered, the echo carrying her words. "I didn't always live in a watchpost," he said, his voice tight. "After my exile, I went aground, literally, for a time. These borderlands are riddled with old places, forgotten places. The packs fear them. They call them the unclaimed depths. Superstition keeps them out. They chose a tunnel at random, one that sloped gently downward. The phosphorescence faded, and true darkness descended. They moved by touch and sound, the scuff of their feet, the drip of water, their own breathing. Time lost meaning. What felt like an hour later, Ryland stopped her. "Do you hear that?" She listened. Beyond their breathing, there was a new sound. A soft, rhythmic scraping. And a smell musky, animal but wrong, sour. A low growl reverberated through the tunnel, not from in front, but from all around them. Eyes began to open in the darkness. Dozens of them, reflecting a light that wasn't there. They were not wolf eyes. They were too small, too close together. "Not rogues," Ryland breathed, shifting to put his back to hers. "Cave dwellers, feral, inbred things that have never seen the moon. They're blind. They hunt by sound and smell." The scraping intensified. The creatures were moving along the walls, the ceiling. Elara's heart hammered against her ribs. They had escaped the sophisticated terror of Kaelen, only to face a primitive, swarming horror in the dark. "We run," Ryland decided, his voice leaving no room for argument. "And we don't stop. They'll swarm." He took her hand, and they ran, stumbling and blind, into the deeper black. The skittering, scraping pursuit erupted behind them, a wave of clicking claws and hissing breaths. Elara ran, fear a sharp taste in her mouth, sure that at any moment, claws would rake her legs or teeth would sink into her neck. The tunnel twisted, then opened abruptly. They spilled out into another cavern, this one smaller, with a high ceiling through which cracks of faint, grayish light filtered down. It was daylight, she realized. They were under a forest floor somewhere. The light revealed their pursuers for a fleeting second. Pale, hairless, multi-limbed creatures with gaping maws, swarming over each other in the tunnel mouth. But the light also revealed something else. In the center of the cavern, stacked with eerie neatness, were bones. Piles of them. Deer, wolf, and, unmistakably, humanoid. And standing over them, calmly watching the swarm halt at the edge of the light, was a figure. It was a man, or had been once. He was emaciated, dressed in tattered remnants of what might have been a broken claw warrior's leathers. His hair was long and matted, but his eyes, reflecting the gray light, were sharp, intelligent, and utterly mad. He tilted his head, his voice a dry rustle. "Visitors, how delightful! The deep dwellers bring me such interesting gifts, but they are usually less vocal." Rylan pushed Elara behind him, his body coiled. "We're just passing through. Passing through," the man crooned, taking a step forward. The pale creatures chittered but didn't cross into the light. He was their master or their god. "No one passes through the larder of the buried king." Elara's blood ran cold. This was his territory. The bones were his trophies, and they were standing in the middle of them. The madman's eyes fixed on her, and a slow, dreadful smile spread across his gaunt face. "An omega. I haven't tasted an omega's fear in, an age. The surface packs keep you so close." He inhaled deeply, shuddering with pleasure. "You're running from the Silverfang King. I can smell his claim all over you like cheap perfume. And you," his gaze shifted to Rylan, "you smell of exile, of old blood and betrayal, a pair of lost causes." "We're not your concern," Rylan growled, his claws extending. "Everything that falls into my kingdom is my concern," the buried king hissed. He raised a bony hand. The pale creatures seethed at the tunnel entrance. "You have two choices. Join my collection," he gestured to the bones, "or provide me with a service. I desire something from the world above. Bring it to me, and I will show you a path that leads out of my realm and into the very heart of where you need to go." Elara's mind raced. This was a trap. It had to be, but the swarm was at their back, and this creature, whatever he was, controlled it. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. The buried king's smile widened, revealing stained, sharpened teeth. "The Silverfang King hunts you with a silver whistle, a pretty thing. It sings a song only you can hear." His eyes gleamed with avarice. "I collect rare songs. Bring me the whistle. Pluck it from the king's neck yourself. Do this, and I will guide you to the secret back door of the Broken Claw Alpha's own den." The audacity of the demand stole her breath. He was asking her to walk up to Kaelen and take the source of his power over her. It was suicide. But as she stood there, surrounded by bones and madness, feeling the distant, muffled thrum of the bond even through the stone, she realized the horrific genius of it. The one thing that could permanently sever Kaelen's psychic hold was in her mate's possession, and the one creature offering a path to her ultimate destination, the conspirator's doorstep in the heart of enemy territory, wanted it as payment. Rylan was rigid beside her. "We can fight our way out," he muttered, but the odds were written in the piles of bones. The buried king saw his hesitation. "Oh, you'll die bravely, and she'll last a little longer, screaming so sweetly. Or," he said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that echoed in the cavern, "you can turn the hunt on the hunter. Steal his voice, and I will give you the key to the kingdom you need to burn." He was offering a devil's bargain. To escape one king, she would have to betray another and promise the spoils to a third. The weight of the choice pressed down on her, heavier than the mountain above them. She looked at Rylan, seeing the same grim calculation in his eyes. They were out of good options. Only terrible ones remained. Elara met the buried king's insane, gleaming gaze. Her voice, when it came, was steadier than she felt. "How do we find you again?" His laugh was the sound of rocks grinding together. "You won't have to find me, little Omega. The moment you hold that whistle in your hand, I will find you." He snapped his fingers. The swarm of pale creatures parted, revealing a single, narrow tunnel on the far side of the bone-littered floor, one that sloped upward. A path to the surface, a path back to Kaelen. "The hunt continues," the buried king whispered, fading back into the shadows of his larder. "But now you have a new prey. Run along, and do try to bring me my song." The choice was made. They were going back up, back into the territory of the Silverfang King, not to flee, but to steal from him. As they moved toward the offered tunnel, the enormity of it crashed over Elara. If only she had known, when she first fled the Alpha Mansion, that her journey would lead her to bargain with a monster in the dark, just for the chance to confront another. The last thing she heard as they entered the ascending passage was the buried king's rustling voice, echoing up after them. "Remember, I'll be listening." The surface air was a slap of cold, pine, and terrifying freedom. Elara hauled herself over the lip of the sinkhole, her fingers digging into frozen moss. Above, the sky was a bruised twilight. Behind, in the dark, a mad king waited for a prize she had to steal from the one being in the world she never wanted to face again. If only I had known the true cost of that bargain. "Move," Rylan grunted from behind her, his voice tight. He scrambled up, his lean frame tense as a bowstring. He didn't look at the hole they'd just left, as if the buried king's gaze could follow them up through stone. "We need distance. And a plan. Stealing from Kaelen isn't a plan. It's a death wish." "It's the only wish we've got," Elara whispered, her own voice raw. The muffling effect of the deep stone was gone. The mate bond was a dormant, silver-cold thread in her chest again, quiet but present. A sleeping snake. The whistle would wake it. She shuddered. "He'll be hunting. The bond pull failed. He'll be furious." The sound of the underground river faded, replaced by the sigh of wind through the Blackwood's skeletal branches. It was a cleaner sound than the drip and scuttle of the depths, but no less menacing. Rylan led them east at a punishing pace, away from the sinkhole and the savage borderlands. "He'll be combing the area where he lost you," he said, his breath fogging. "The watchpost, the gully. He'll assume you're running from him, not toward him. That's our one advantage, his arrogance." "How do we find him?" Elara asked, her legs burning. The brief respite below had stiffened her muscles. "We don't. We let him find us, but on our terms." Rylan stopped beside a lightning-shattered pine, his eyes scanning the darkening woods. The sound of a distant owl hooted, a lonely, hollow note. "The whistle is an alpha tool. He won't keep it in a pocket. It'll be on him, probably on a chain. You can't just pick his pocket, little wolf." "Then what?" Frustration bubbled in her throat. "We ask nicely." A grim, humorless smile touched Rylan's lips. "We use what he can't resist. You, the bond, but we bait the trap with something else." He turned to her fully, his gaze intent. "The conspirator, the one who gave you the map. If we can draw them out, force a meeting, Kaelen will come. His rage will be a beacon. In that chaos, you get close. You take the whistle." Elara stared at him. The wind seemed to still. "You want to use me as live bait for two alphas. One who wants to cage me, and one who wants me dead to start a war." "I want my brother's name cleared," Rylan said, his voice low and fierce. "And you want to live. This is the only path that serves both. The conspirator is close. They've been watching, guiding. They'll know you've slipped Kaelin's net again. They'll make a move to correct the plan, to push you toward broken claw territory." We just have to be visible enough to be seen, but not so visible we're caught. What happened next changed everything. They moved under the cover of a moonless night. Ryland's plan was a fragile, terrifying thing. They would travel parallel to the main rogue trails, the paths a desperate Omega might take, leaving just enough trace. A snapped twig at the wrong height, the faintest lingering scent on a downwind boulder. They were painting a picture for an unseen artist. Elara's nerves were live wires. Every rustle was a hunter. Every shadow was Kaelen. The bond in her chest was a silent hum, a reminder of the leash she was about to tug. They reached a rocky outcrop overlooking a narrow, frozen stream. "Here," Rylan murmured. "We rest. If they're going to show, it'll be soon. This is a natural funnel." The sound of the stream was a brittle trickle under ice. Elara huddled against the cold stone, her senses stretched thin. She could smell the iron of the rocks, the damp of the moss, Ryland's tense, leather and pine scent. And underneath it all, the ever-present, fading sweetness of her own Omega fear. "Tell me about him," she whispered, to fill the silence. "Your brother." Rylan was silent for so long she thought he'd ignored her. The owl hooted again, closer. "Thuron," he finally said, the name a soft exhale. "He was everything a beta should be, strong, loyal, smart. He saw patterns others missed. That was his gift and his curse." He picked up a pebble, rolled it in his palm. The sound was a faint click-click. "He came to me a week before he was executed. He said he'd found a sickness in the pack, not a physical one, a rot. Someone was diverting resources, whispering to allies of the broken claw, trading secrets for promises. He was close to naming them. And he was framed for it," Elara concluded, the pieces fitting together with a dreadful clarity. "The evidence was perfect." Ryland's voice was flat. "Hidden silver, coded messages in his hand, witnesses who swore they saw him at the border. Kaelen was young in his kingship then. He saw the proof, saw the threat, and acted. I spoke for Thuron. I called it a lie." He looked at her, his eyes gleaming in the dark. "That's when I learned the price of doubt. Exile or a silver cell. I chose the woods." The consequence of loyalty. Elara understood it in her bones. She had chosen the woods, too. "And you think the same person is doing this now, using me. The same methods, the same goal. Weaken Silverfang through war, create chaos, seize power from the ashes." He crushed the pebble to dust. "The map with the old beta's sigil wasn't just a tool for you. It was a message to Kaelen. A taunt. See, the traitor's legacy lives. It's all a performance." A new sound cut through the night. Not the owl, not the wind. It was the soft, deliberate crunch of a foot on frozen snow. A single step, down by the stream. Rylan went preternaturally still. Elara's breath caught. They were here. The reaction was instantaneous. Ryland's hand clamped over her mouth, his other arm pulling her back into a deeper shadow of the outcrop. His heart hammered against her shoulder blade. They waited. Another crunch. Closer. A shape detached itself from the tree line, moving with a predator's patience toward the spot where they'd been moments before. It was a wolf, but not in full shift. A hulking, man-shaped silhouette with a lupin hunch to its shoulders. It paused, head lifting, sniffing the air. Elara caught the scent. Pack, Silverfang, but laced with something else, a sharp, coppery tang of ambition and hidden malice. This was no ordinary hunter. The figure straightened. "Little Omega," a voice called out, smooth as oiled leather. It was a voice she didn't recognize, male, confident. "You've led us on quite a dance, but the music is ending. Come out. The broken claw awaits their prize. Don't make me sing for you." Sing. The word hung in the air. Ryland's body tensed. The silver whistle. This was him, the conspirator, and he had won. But he wasn't Kaelen. The realization was a lightning strike. There were two whistles. Or had this wolf stolen Kaelen's? The plan shattered and reformed in an instant. This was the chance. It was here, not with Kaelen, but with this shadow. Ryland's lips were at her ear, a breath so faint it was almost thought. "He has it! Take it! I'll draw him!" Before she could protest, he moved. Soundlessly, he melted away to the left, circling behind the outcrop. Elara was alone, the cold stone at her back, the shadowy figure 30 paces away. A new sound, a sharp, pained yelp from the woods to the north, Ryland's voice perfectly mimicked. The figure's head snapped toward it. "The exile," he muttered. "A complication." He took a step toward the sound, his hand going to his belt. Elara saw it, the glint of silver at his throat, not on a chain but dangling from a leather cord. The whistle. This was the moment. Action. She didn't think, she moved. Slipping from her hiding place, she used the sound of the trickling stream to mask her steps. She was downwind. Her omega scent was weak, muted by fear and cold stone. She closed the distance, a ghost in the gloom. 10 paces. 5. The conspirator paused, his hand dropping from the whistle. He sensed something. He began to turn. Elara lunged. Her fingers closed around the cold, intricately carved silver. She yanked with all her strength. The leather cord snapped. The world exploded. A roar of fury erupted from the trees, not from the conspirator, but from the woods beyond. A roar she knew in her soul that vibrated through the mate bond like a plucked nerve. Kaelen. He'd been there, watching, waiting. The conspirator spun, his face a mask of shock that twisted into rage as he saw the whistle in Elara's hand. "You little fool," he snarled, and his form began to blur, bones cracking as he shifted. But Kaelen was faster. A silver-furred avalanche erupted from the darkness. The Alpha King in his war form, massive and terrible, slammed into the conspirator mid-shift. The sound was a sickening crunch of bone and a snarl that shook the trees. Ice shattered from branches, tinkling down like falling glass. Elara stumbled back, the cold silver of the whistle burning her palm. She clutched it, her eyes wide with horror. The 2 wolves were a whirlwind of fur and fury. She saw the conspirator fully shift, a dark, brindled beast with cunning eyes. He was powerful, but Kaelen was a force of nature. Silver claws raked, drawing dark lines across brindled fur. Ryland burst from the trees, a gray streak. He didn't join the fight. He grabbed Elara's arm. "Run, now!" They ran. The sounds of the brutal fight behind them were a symphony of snarls and snapping jaws, fading as they plunged into the thick forest. Elara's heart felt like it would burst. She had it. She had the key to the buried king's path. They ran until their lungs were fire, and the sounds of combat were swallowed by the forest. They collapsed in a hollow beneath the roots of a fallen giant, the smell of damp earth and rot thick in their noses. Elara gasped for air, opening her fist. The silver whistle lay in her palm, gleaming dully. It was carved like a tiny, screaming wolf head. "We did it," she panted, a hysterical laugh bubbling up. "We actually." The whistle in her hand grew warm, then hot. A soundless command, pure and absolute, slammed through the mate bond. It was not a pull. It was a voice. Kaelen's voice, etched in silver and fury, echoing from the very object in her hand and resonating in the bond he knew she still carried. "Found you." The words were not heard. They were felt, in her marrow, in her soul. And then, through the bond, came a surge of location, not hers, his, a clear, undeniable image seared into her mind. Kaelen standing over the broken, lifeless form of the brindled conspirator, blood on his muzzle. His golden eyes, burning with triumph, looking directly at her through the bond. He was miles away, but in that moment he was right in front of her. He had used the whistle, not to call her, to mark her, to show her his victory, and to show her he was coming. The whistle wasn't just a tool, it was a beacon, and she was holding it, lighting up the dark for the hunter who now knew exactly where to look. Rylan saw the terror on her face. What? What is it? Elara couldn't speak. She could only stare at the cursed silver in her hand as the final, chilling sound reached their ears from the direction of the distant fight. It was the long, haunting, and victorious howl of the Alpha King. A howl that said the chase was over. It was answered a moment later from the east by a deeper, more savage chorus. The howls of the Broken Claw Pack, drawn by the blood, drawn by the rage. The war was beginning. And Elara was at the center, holding the signal fire. The command was a silver nail driven through her skull. Found you. Elara stumbled, the stolen whistle burning like a brand in her clenched fist. Kaelen's triumphant howl shook the frozen pines, and from the east a chorus of savage, answering howls rose, the Broken Claw, summoned to war. Run! Rylan's voice was a raw scrape beside her. The hollow now. Her legs were lead, her mind a storm of compulsion and terror. That single psychic command had left a ghost echo in her muscles, a pull toward the source. She fought it, turning it into fuel for her flight. They scrambled down the rocky slope, away from the outcrop where Kaelen stood over the conspirator's body, and dove into the tangled, snow-dusted roots of a fallen giant. The hollow beneath was cramped, stinking of wet earth and decay, but it hid them from the sky. Silence for 3 heartbeats. Then the forest erupted. The sound was not just howls now, but snarls, the crash of bodies through underbrush, and the wet, tearing sounds of combat. The war had begun not a mile from their hiding place. Kaelen's Silverfangs, drawn by his howl and the whistle's beacon, were colliding with the advancing Broken Claw patrols. The air grew thick with the coppery scent of blood and the ozone stink of rage. Rylan pressed against the earth, listening. He's playing right into it. The war, it's here. Elara uncurled her fingers. The silver whistle lay in her palm, intricate and cold. It was smaller than she'd imagined, etched with tiny, predatory runes. This is what he used on me. What he's using now. She could feel it. A faint, humming thread connecting the metal to the bond in her chest, a thread that led straight back to Kaelen. It was a leash and a lodestone. And it's a beacon, Rylan said, his eyes grim. As long as you hold it, he can find you. He can send those commands. It works both ways. The buried king wants it. The buried king wants a song, Rylan corrected, his voice low. That whistle is a song of pure domination. He'd cherish it, but we can't go back down. Not with the packs tearing each other apart above ground. He peered through a gap in the roots. We need to move. This war is our chaos, our cover, but we have to get away from this spot. He knows you're here. Elara's mind raced, the Omega part of her screaming to curl up and make herself small amidst the giants fighting. But the part of her that had fled the silver-lined cells, that had survived the mad rogue and the dark, was harder. Sharper. He's distracted. He has to fight. He can't just chase me. Don't underestimate his obsession, little wolf, Rylan said, but there was a flicker of approval in his eyes. You're right. It's our only window, but we have a new problem. He pointed east, through the lattice of roots. Through the trees, she could see moving shadows, hulking, low-slung forms with a distinctive, limping gait. Broken Claw flankers. They're circling wide. If we run north, we run into them. If we run south, we run back toward Kaelen and the main fight. Then we go where they won't follow, Elara whispered, the idea forming with terrifying clarity. We go into the heart of it. Rylan stared at her. You're mad. The buried king said the tunnels lead to the Broken Claw den. Their heart. If everyone is out here fighting, she clutched the whistle. It's the last place they'd expect us, and it's the only place we can deliver this. The sounds of battle crescendoed, a piercing yelp of agony, a roar of challenge. A tree splintered nearby. They were out of time. "If we're doing this," Rylan growled, decision hardening his face, "we do it now. And we use their war as a map. Where the fighting is thickest, the den will be emptiest. Follow the pull of the whistle." "What? You feel him, don't you? Kaelen, you know what direction he's in." Elara nodded, a sick feeling in her gut. The bond was a cold knot, tugging insistently toward the west of the chaos. "Then we go the opposite way, east, deep into Broken Claw territory. Find another sinkhole, another crack in the world that leads down." He shifted, ready to move. "It's the worst plan I've ever agreed to." They burst from the hollow, not as wolves, but on two legs, quieter and more nimble. The forest was a nightmare painting. Shadows moved with violent speed. She saw a Silverfang warrior, his fur matted with gore, locked jaw to jaw with a massive broken claw brute. She saw a rogue, caught between both, torn apart. Snow was churned to red mud. Elara ran, her breath sobbing in her lungs, Rylan a silent ghost at her side. They weaved through the chaos, a breath away from death at every turn. The pull of the bond was a constant distraction, a siren song whispering, come home, little wolf." She focused on the cold weight of the whistle, on the memory of the buried king's empty eyes. A trade, your freedom for his song. What happened next changed everything. They crested a rise, and the land fell away into a rocky, ice-rimed gully. Below, a frozen stream wound like a silver scar. And on the other side, standing sentinel over a jagged, dark opening in the earth, was a broken claw sentry. He was huge, one paw twisted and useless, but his eyes were alert. He hadn't joined the fight. He was guarding. "The den," Rylan breathed, pulling her down behind a boulder. "That's it. That's the way in." But the sentry was in their path. And as they watched, another shape emerged from the tunnel, smaller, leaner, carrying a bundle of pelts. A female. They exchanged low grunts. 2 guards, no way through. Elara's heart sank. Then she looked at the whistle in her hand. An insane, desperate idea took hold. It was a beacon, a tool of compulsion. "What if... Can he tell who's using it?" she whispered. Rylan followed her gaze. "No. It's just a key to the bond. But the command has to come from a will strong enough to wield it. Your will, Elara." Her blood ran cold. She wasn't an alpha, she was an omega. Her power was to soothe, to submit, to be a balm, not to command. But you have his attention, a new, fierce voice inside her hissed. "You have a piece of his power, use it." The female guard turned, beginning to walk along the stream bank away from the den entrance. The massive sentry watched her go, then turned his back, scanning the opposite tree line. "Now or never," Rylan urged. Elara's fingers trembled. She raised the silver whistle to her lips. It tasted of winter and blood. She didn't blow. She focused every ounce of her fear, her defiance, her sheer need into the bond that connected her to Kaelen. She poured it down that silver thread and into the whistle. And she pushed. It wasn't a sound. It was a silent, psychic shriek of location. Not a command to come, but a blast of pure, amplified here. A mile away through the trees, a furious, deafening roar shook the battlefield. Kaelen, he had felt it. He knew. The effect on the broken claw sentry was immediate. His head snapped up, not toward Elara, but toward the source of Kaelen's answering rage, the heart of the battle. He howled a warning, a specific, urgent call that echoed through the gully. From the den mouth, 2 more wolves emerged, snarling. The female guard spun and ran back. They think it's an attack signal. They think Kaelen is calling for an assault here. Rylan grabbed her arm, his eyes wide with a mix of horror and admiration. "You just redirected the war." The 4 broken claw warriors gathered. Then as one, they shifted and launched themselves toward the distant sounds of battle, leaving the den entrance utterly unguarded. The path was clear. They slid down the gully, across the slick ice of the stream, and into the mouth of the tunnel. The darkness swallowed them, the sounds of war becoming muffled, then distant. This was not a natural cave. The walls were marked with crude, violent carvings, claw marks, tally counts, images of torn moons. The air smelled of wet wolf, rot, and a deep, earthy musk. They moved in silence for what felt like an hour, the tunnel sloping steeply downward. The tension was a live wire between them. They were in the belly of the beast. Finally, the tunnel opened into a vast, cavernous space. It was not like the buried king's phosphorescent cathedral. This was a den of filth and bone. The remains of countless kills littered the floor. Makeshift nests of fur and debris were piled against the walls. At the far end, a massive, crude throne of antlers and skulls sat empty. A single shaft of pale, gray light fell from a crack high above, illuminating the throne and the figure kneeling before it. Not a broken claw wolf. A man, or what was left of one. He was shirtless, shivering, his skin crisscrossed with fresh scars and old silver burns. He was chained by his ankles to the base of the throne. As the light caught his face, he looked up. Rylan froze. A sound escaped him, a wounded, disbelieving gasp. The prisoner's eyes, sunken and haunted, met Rylan's. A decade of pain and silence hung in the air between them. "Rylan!" the prisoner croaked, his voice unused, shattered. Elara watched as Rylan's face, always so guarded, so controlled, completely shattered. His knees buckled. He took a stumbling step forward. "Thuron!" The world tilted. Thuron, the traitor Beta, executed a decade ago. Brother. Alive. He never killed you," Rylan whispered, falling to his knees before the chained man. "He kept you all this time." Thuron's laugh was a dry, broken thing. A trophy, a pet, a reminder to any other Beta who might think of betrayal. He lifted his hands, showing wrists scarred by manacles. "The broken claw alpha enjoys his trophies. He took me after the execution was staged." The conspiracy had roots deeper than they'd imagined. Kaelen hadn't just been manipulated into this war. He'd been living a lie for a decade. The true traitor, the conspirator they'd just seen killed, hadn't just framed Thuron. He'd sold him. And Kaelen, in his ruthless pride, had never questioned the body presented to him. The disciple, Elara breathed, understanding dawning like cold sunrise. "The conspirator wasn't just continuing your brother's methods, Rylan. He was covering up the original crime. My escape, the war, it was all to bury this secret forever. If Silverfang and Broken Claw destroyed each other, no one would ever come looking here. No one would ever know." Thuron's eyes, so like his brother's, found hers. "You're the Omega." It wasn't a question. "He's coming for you, the real Alpha. He's coming here." A new sound echoed down the tunnel behind them. Not the distant war. This was closer. The pad of heavy, limping paws. A low, wet growl that vibrated through the stone. The shaft of light on the throne shifted. A monstrous shadow filled the tunnel entrance they had just used. The smell of blood and wet fur flooded the cavern. Slowly, with a grinding of bone on stone, the massive form of the broken claw alpha entered his den. His fur was clotted with fresh blood and matted with old filth. One paw was a twisted, useless club. His muzzle was pulled back in a perpetual snarl, revealing yellowed, broken fangs. His eyes, small and blazing with feral intelligence, swept past Rylan, past the chained Thuron, and locked onto Elara. He took a deep, rattling inhale, scenting the air, scenting the Omega, scenting the silver whistle in her hand. He spoke, his voice a gravelly avalanche of hate. "Mine!" Rylan surged to his feet, placing himself between Elara and the Alpha. but Thuron yanked on his chains, his voice a desperate rasp. "The chains, the key. It's on the throne." Elara's gaze darted to the antler throne. Dangling from a central, jagged point was a crude iron key. The broken claw alpha took a step forward, his growl deepening. He was between them and the exit, between them and the key. In the heart of his den, with the war raging above, and Kaelen drawn inexorably toward the beacon in her hand. The alpha's lips peeled back further. "Little songbird," he rumbled, his eyes fixed on the whistle. "You bring me a pretty noise. I will enjoy breaking you to sing it." And from the tunnel behind the alpha, a new, familiar scent washed into the cavern, frost, iron, and furious, possessive power. A shadow, proud and terrible, filled the passage. Kaelen's voice, smooth as a honed blade and just as deadly, cut through the stagnant air. "I believe you have something that belongs to me." The broken claw alpha filled the cavern entrance, his twisted paws scraping stone. Behind him, from the tunnel, came the unmistakable, earth-shaking roar of Kaelen. Two alphas, one den, and us trapped in the middle. What happened next changed everything. The broken claw alpha's scarred muzzle wrinkled in a snarl, his focus snapping from us to the entrance. His own guards were outside, drawn away by my whistle trick, now facing Kaelen. A king at his doorstep was a more immediate threat than prey already in his larder. "Move!" Rylan hissed, shoving the heavy iron key into the manacle lock on Thuron's wrist. The click was deafening in the tense silence. Thuron crumpled as the chain released, a decade of tension evaporating. He was a skeleton wrapped in scarred skin, but his eyes, so like Rylan's, burned with a fierce, pained light. "The throne!" he rasped, his voice unused. "The alpha. He keeps a weapon, in the antler." The broken claw alpha turned back, sensing the shift. A guttural growl built in his chest, the sound of rocks grinding. Outside, the clash of combat erupted, snarls, screams, the wet crunch of bone. Kaelen was carving his way in. "Get him up!" I said, darting forward, not towards the entrance, but towards the massive, crude throne of skulls and antlers. The alpha's eyes tracked me, and he lunged. He was fast, terrifyingly so for his size. I threw myself sideways, hitting the filthy ground as a clawed paw swiped where my head had been. I rolled, the silver whistle digging into my palm inside my pocket. Not yet. Rylan was hauling Thuron towards the cavern's shadowy rear, away from the 2 points of danger. "Elara!" My fingers scrabbled over the cold, greasy antlers of the throne. A weapon. Where? I shoved my hand into a dark hollow where a massive skull socket gaped. My fingers closed around something cold and metallic. A short, brutal blade, its handle wrapped in leather, its edge stained. The alpha loomed over me, his hot, rancid breath washing over me. He wasn't growling anymore. He was smiling, a nightmare expression of broken teeth and triumph. He knew I was cornered. If only I had known how deep his madness went. He spoke, his voice a wet, grating thing. "Little Silverfang bitch, he will trade you for his beta's bones." He meant Kaelen. He thought he could bargain. From the tunnel, Kaelen's voice roared, clear and commanding above the din. "Elara." The sound of my name, his voice laced with the alpha command and the raw pull of the bond, was a physical blow. My knees buckled. The broken claw alpha's smile widened. He heard it too, the possession, the connection. It made me more valuable. He reached for me. I didn't slash with the blade. I threw it, end over end, towards the shadows where Rylan crouched with Thuron. "Rylan." The alpha's head turned, following the blade's arc. It was the distraction I needed. I scrambled backwards on all fours, not towards the entrance, but deeper into the den, past the throne, into the unknown darkness of the cavern's rear. The ground was slick with refuse and old blood. A roar of fury. Not from the broken claw alpha, but from the entrance. Kaelen stood there, framed by firelight and chaos, his clothes torn, his knuckles bloody. He had broken through. His silver-flecked eyes found me instantly, then swung to the massive alpha who stood between us. "Mine!" Kaelen said, the word a final decree. The two alphas collided. The sound was like two boulders crashing together. No finesse, no strategy, just pure, brutal dominance. Claws ripped. Fangs snapped. They became a whirlwind of fur and fury, rolling across the bone-littered floor. I kept moving, my back against the cold cavern wall, edging towards Rylan. He had the blade. He'd cut a length of filthy hide and was binding Thuron's feet, making crude shoes. Thuron was watching the alpha fight, his expression one of profound, weary hatred. "The rear wall," Thuron whispered as I reached them. "A crack, an old water channel, it leads out." "Maybe." Rylan followed his gaze to a narrow, dark fissure in the rock. It looked like a dead end. "How do you know?" "I listened. For 10 years, I listened." Thuron's hand gripped Rylan's arm. "Go, this is not your fight." Outside the den, the battle was dying. Kaelen had come alone, a spearhead. The broken claw guards were slain or fleeing. The only fight that mattered was here, in the throne room. Kaelen had the upper hand. He was younger, fueled by a possessive rage that was somehow more focused than the broken claw alpha's savage hunger. He drove a fist into the alpha's throat, then raked his claws across his belly. The broken claw alpha howled, a sound of pain and maddened fury. He disengaged, staggering back towards his throne, towards us. His blood poured onto the stones. His eyes, yellow and insane, locked on me again. Not as a bargaining chip anymore. As a final prize to deny his enemy. He charged. Not at Kaelen, at me. Time slowed. I saw Rylan shove Thuron towards the fissure. I saw Kaelen face a mask of fury leaping to intercept. And I felt the silver whistle burn in my hand. I yanked it out. I didn't blow it. I focused every ounce of my will, my fear, my defiance, down the frayed, hateful tether of the mate bond. I poured a single, silent command into it, aimed not at Kaelen, but through him, using the bond as a conduit, the whistle as an amplifier. Here, now, the effect was instantaneous. Kaelen, mid-leap, shuddered as the amplified bond command ripped through him, a foreign pulse using his own connection. It didn't stop him, but it disoriented him for a critical half-second. The broken claw alpha was upon me. His weight smashed me into the cavern wall. The air left my lungs in a whoosh. I felt a rib crack. His jaws, dripping saliva and blood, snapped for my face. I brought my arms up, the silver whistle clenched in my fist, and shoved it between his teeth. He bit down. The scream that tore from him was unlike any sound I'd ever heard. Silver on a werewolf's gums on the tongue. It wasn't a lethal wound, but it was agony. Pure, shocking agony. He recoiled, gagging, pawing at his mouth. Kaelen's attack hit him from the side. This time it was final. With a wrenching twist and a sickening crack, Kaelen broke the broken claw alpha's neck. The massive body slumped to the ground, twitching, then still. Silence, sudden and profound, rushed into the cavern. The only sounds were our ragged breathing, the drip of water, and the faint moan of wind from the entrance tunnel. Kaelen stood over the dead alpha, his chest heaving. Then he turned. His gaze swept past the corpse, past the throne, and landed on me, still pinned against the wall, clutching my side. His eyes held no triumph, only a dark, simmering possession. He took a step towards me. "Little wolf," he said, his voice rough. "You led a merry chase." Rylan stepped between us, the stolen blade held low and ready. Thuron leaned heavily against the fissure in the wall. The standoff was different now. The external enemy was gone. This was the true reckoning. "It's over, Kaelen," I said, pushing myself upright. The pain in my side was a sharp, clear thing. The conspirator is dead. The war is a lie. Thuron is alive. You were deceived. Kaelen's eyes flicked to Thuron, taking in the living ghost of his former beta. A muscle twitched in his jaw. The foundation of his rule, his justice, had just crumbled. A lie, he repeated, the word flat. Staged by your own, Ryland spat, his voice thick with a decade of bitterness. To hide the fact that they sold a loyal beta to our enemies, to bury the secret in a war. Kaelen was silent for a long moment, assessing. The Alpha King calculating. The mate bond between us thrummed, a live wire of tension and unresolved fury. He could feel my pain, my defiance. I could feel his rage, his confusion, his unyielding claim. A betrayal within my pack, he said slowly. A grave one, it will be rooted out, fully. His eyes returned to me. But it does not change other facts. You are mine. You renounced your pack. You fled. You stole from me. He held out his hand, not for me, but for the whistle. That belongs to your alpha. I closed my fingers around it. The silver was warm from the broken claw alpha's mouth, tainted. I have no alpha. He took another step. Ryland shifted his weight, a clear warning. Kaelen ignored him, his focus absolute. You feel the bond, you cannot deny it, it pulls at you even now. It is why you are still here, and not vanished into that crack in the wall. He was right. The bond was a hook in my soul, and he held the line. The whistle in my hand was both a tool and a symbol of it. The bond is a chain, I said, my voice trembling not with fear, but with the effort of standing against the tidal pull of his will. You used it to hunt me, to hurt me. A true mate doesn't cage. A king shouldn't need a leash. His expression darkened. You speak of things you do not understand, of strength, of order. Come home. The one who wronged you is dead. The pack will see you restored. It was the same offer, wrapped in the same iron control. Come home to your gilded cage. Be grateful. The cavern seemed to shrink, the walls pressing in. Thuron's labored breathing, Ryland's tense readiness, the stench of blood and death. This was the culmination of all my running. I looked at Ryland, who had fought for a ghost and found a brother. I looked at Thuron, who had endured a decade of torment for a loyalty he never broke. They had a truth, a purpose that went beyond possession. I had only the desperate need to be free. I made my choice. I lifted the silver whistle to my lips. Kaelen's eyes flared with warning. He thought I would blow it to summon, to confuse. Instead, I focused inward, down the bond, to the very root of the tether that connected us. I poured into it not a command, but a memory. The memory he'd given me in the forest when he first used the whistle. The searing, silver-cold pain of rejection, of being an object, a possession. I amplified it with all my will, all my pain, and sent it back down the line, a psychic scream of renunciation. Kaelen staggered as if struck. A grunt of pain escaped him. The bond wasn't broken, such things were near impossible, but I had scarred it, blackened it with my refusal. You dare, he growled, true shock in his voice. I do, I said, and before he could recover, I threw the whistle. Not to him. Into the deep shadows near the throne, where it clattered and vanished among the bones. I am not your little wolf. I am not your Omega. I am Elara. And I am leaving. I turned towards the fissure. Ryland was already helping Thuron into the narrow opening. Kaelen moved. He was a blur of motion, crossing the space in a heartbeat, his hand shooting out to grab my arm. Ryland's blade intercepted. It didn't strike Kaelen, but slammed flat against his outstretched forearm, blocking the grab. The thwack of metal on muscle echoed. The fight is over, King, Ryland said, his voice cold and final. You have your dead traitor. You have a dead rival alpha. You have the truth. Chase her now, and you prove her right. You prove you're nothing but a slaver chasing lost property. Kaelen froze, his eyes locked on Ryland's. The truth of the words hung in the air, more damaging than any blade. To pursue me now, after all this, would be to admit his claim was not about destiny or the moon, but about pride and possession. It would undermine the very authority he needed to rebuild his pack from the conspiracy's wreckage. He looked at me, his gaze a storm of conflict, rage, possession, and a dawning, furious understanding. The bond between us screamed with tension, a frayed, painful thing. "Go, then," he said, the words ripped from him. "Run, Elara, the Blackwood is vast, but know this. The bond remains, and I am not a patient man." It was not a release. It was a postponement. But it was enough. I didn't look back. I ducked into the fissure after Rylan and Thuron. The rock was tight, cold, and damp. We squeezed through darkness for what felt like an eternity, the sounds of the den fading behind us, replaced by the drip of water and our own frantic movements. Then ahead, a sliver of gray light. Cold, fresh air. We emerged not into the savage borderlands, but onto a rocky ledge overlooking a steep, pine-covered ravine. Dawn was breaking, pale and weak, filtering through a mist that clung to the trees. The world was silent, cleansed by distance. We collapsed together on the ledge, three exiles bound by shattered loyalty and newfound truth. Thuron lay back, his face to the sky, breathing in free air for the first time in 10 years. Rylan watched the tree line, the blade still in his hand, but his shoulders had lost their perpetual defensive hunch. I sat, clutching my aching side, and looked out at the vast, wild expanse of the Blackwood. It was no longer just a place of terror and flight. It was a place of possibility. Kaelen was out there, and the bond was a ghost limb that still ached. But for the first time, the path ahead was my own. The wind sighed through the pines, carrying away the scent of blood and den. Somewhere, an early bird called, a clear, lonely sound in the immense quiet. Rylan finally spoke, his voice rough. "Where now?" I looked at him, then at Thuron, then back at the endless, untamed forest. A faint, weary smile touched my lips. It held no joy but a fragile, hard-won certainty. "Anywhere," I said, and we walked, together into the dawn.